Welcome to True Echo, where real voices rise, true dignity speaks louder than prejudice, and the power of justice echoes through every story we share. Today's story begins with a moment of humiliation, but ends in a reckoning that no one at that luxury boutique will ever forget. Danielle Brooks hadn't set out to make a statement that morning. All she wanted was to find the perfect birthday gift for her husband, Raymond, a man who had stood beside her through every chapter of their incredible life. A man she adored not for his wealth or his legacy, but for the quiet strength he offered her every day. Dressed simply in a crisp white tee and gray joggers, her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, Danielle strolled confidently down Rodeo Drive. She blended in by standing out, not because of loud designer labels, but because of her grace. Passing tourists and elites barely glanced her way. That was fine. She wasn't looking for recognition. Danielle loved the thrill of choosing a gift herself rather than sending an assistant. That day, she had her eye on a vintage timepiece, a rare white gold chronomaster, hidden in a boutique whose reputation gleamed almost as brightly as its chandeliers. She crossed the boutique's threshold with purpose. And the air shifted. From the moment the glass doors chimed behind her, it was as if someone had dropped a cold sheet of silence over the store. Eyes flicked toward her, then away. Staff straightened their postures. No smiles. No greetings. As Danielle walked past rows of glittering handbags and sleek marble displays, she felt every step echo. Not because of her sneakers, but because her presence disrupted something unspoken. She spotted the watch immediately. Nestled behind glass, gleaming under lights, it was even more stunning in person. Danielle approached the case, ready to ask for a closer look. But the sales associate, Veronica, didn't rise to greet her. She stayed seated, arms crossed, a tight smile curling her scarlet lips. "That one's $85,000, she said coldly. "Are you sure?" Danielle smiled politely. "Yes. I'd like to see it." Veronica tilted her head, her tone sharpening like glass. "We also have more, budget-friendly options. Costume pieces. Over there." A few customers chuckled behind Danielle. Whispers floated around her like smoke. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't flinch. She stood taller. "I'm here for that one," she repeated. Veronica stood slowly, retrieving the watch with white gloves like she was handling something sacred, something too rare for someone like Danielle. She placed it down, but said nothing. Her eyes spoke volumes. Marcus Devlin, the boutique store manager, had been observing from afar. Tall, sharply dressed, and practiced in the art of superficial politeness, he stepped in now with a perfect fake smile. "Is there a problem, Veronica?" he asked, as if Danielle had been disruptive. Veronica feigned concern. "This customer wants the chronomaster. The one we reserve for qualified buyers." The word, customer, fell from her lips like an insult. Danielle inhaled. "I'm paying in full. No financing needed." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "We'll need to see financial verification. Platinum card minimum. Or a letter of credit." Danielle held her ground. "My husband will be here soon. He can verify anything you need." Marcus smirked. "And who might your husband be? Some Instagram entrepreneur?" The line was deliberate. Cruel. Designed to incite humiliation. Around them, eyes watched like it was theater. Phones were raised discreetly. Giggles spread. Veronica stepped closer, hissing under her breath, "You really should try the department store down the street. This isn't for people like you." Danielle's heart pounded, but she didn't let it show. "Not yet." And then, Marcus delivered the final blow. "If you can't prove you belong, I'll have to ask you to leave." Danielle felt her stomach twist. Her skin, her clothes, her presence, none of it had ever been the problem. The problem was what these people had already decided the moment she walked in, that someone like her could only be pretending. A fraud. An inconvenience. She looked at Marcus Devlin square in the eye. "I walked in here quietly. I asked to see a watch. That's all. But instead of being treated with courtesy, you've tried to humiliate me." Marcus's cold smile faltered, but not for long. "Ma'am, if you don't comply with our store's financial policies, I'll have to." Danielle raised her hand, silencing him. "Don't bother. I'm leaving." She turned, back straight, feet steady. Behind her, laughter rippled softly like a cruel applause. Then, Marcus called out, loud enough to pierce the air and the few remaining fragments of her composure. "Next time, dress the part if you want to belong." The word slammed into Danielle like a slap. Dress the part. People like you. She pushed open the boutique's doors, the California sun spilling warmth over her as the coldness of that place clung to her skin. She paused on the sidewalk. Her throat burned. Her hands trembled. Her pride screamed. And just as the first tear threatened to fall, a soft voice interrupted the spiral. "Are you okay?" Danielle turned to find herself face to face with Lauren Whitaker, the Oscar-nominated actress known for her fierce roles and bold activism. Danielle blinked, not sure if the sun was playing tricks on her. "I saw everything," Lauren said, stepping closer. "That was disgusting. No one should be treated like that. Especially not in a place that calls itself prestige." Danielle's lips trembled, but she nodded. "Thank you. I just wanted to buy my husband a gift. That's all." Lauren looked at her with kind but fire-lit eyes. They didn't see a woman with taste. They saw a stereotype. "They don't deserve your silence." Danielle nodded slowly, the anger and shame inside her beginning to crystallize, not into revenge, but resolve. "I need to make a call," she whispered. She stepped a few feet away, pulling out her phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed Raymond. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, sweetheart," his deep voice rumbled. "I'm just getting out of the meeting. Heading your way. You still at the boutique?" There was a pause. "I'm outside," Danielle said softly. "They kicked me out, Ray." Silence on the line. "They humiliated me," she continued, her voice quiet but steady. "They didn't know who I was. And they didn't care." Raymond's voice dropped to a growl. "I'm 5 minutes away." Danielle didn't need him to shout. She didn't need him to comfort her. What she needed, what they both needed, was the truth to be faced. Without apology. Without delay. As she waited, Danielle watched the boutique's window. Inside, Veronica was laughing with another associate. Marcus leaned on the counter, smug and content. Her humiliation was their entertainment. That's when the black SUV pulled up. The door opened slowly, deliberately, and Raymond Brooks stepped out. The moment his polished shoes touched the pavement, the air around the boutique changed. Pedestrians turned. Phones came out. A few boutique staff spotted him through the window and froze. Raymond adjusted his tie, his frame towering with restrained fury, and made his way toward Danielle. She met him halfway, her composure cracking just a bit when she saw the look in his eyes, protective, furious, and calm as steel. "They laughed, Ray," she said, voice breaking. Raymond took her hand gently, eyes never leaving the boutique. "Not for long," he said. "Not ever again." Then, hand in hand, they turned and walked straight toward the glass doors of Prestige. The crystal bell above the boutique door chimed once again. But this time, the sound didn't fade into background noise. It cut through the air like a warning. Heads turned. Conversations halted. And all eyes landed on the towering figure of Raymond Brooks as he stepped inside. There was no need for him to raise his voice. His presence alone demanded silence. Marcus Devlin's smug posture collapsed the instant he recognized the man entering his domain. The color drained from his face as reality crashed over him like a tidal wave. Raymond Brooks. The billionaire investor. The man whose name alone made stock tickers twitch on Wall Street. The man he had just insulted, by humiliating his wife. Veronica's spine stiffened. Her carefully curated smile vanished. Her hands nervously clutched the counter behind her. Raymond's gaze swept across the room, taking in the boutique's glittering chandeliers, its immaculate white marble floors, and the frozen expressions of the staff who only moments ago had laughed at his wife. He didn't speak right away. He didn't have to. The stillness in the boutique was more deafening than any scream. Then Raymond turned to Marcus, his voice calm, far too calm. Did you just have my wife escorted out of this store? Every customer, every employee, every corner of the boutique held its breath. Marcus stammered. Mr. Brooks, I wasn't aware, there must have been a misunderstanding. We thought, she wasn't. She wasn't what? Raymond cut in, voice sharp but quiet. Dressed well enough? Light-skinned enough? Wealthy-looking enough? No one answered. They couldn't. Raymond turned to the crowd now gathering by the display cases, the same people who had stared and laughed at Danielle. For those of you who witnessed it, let me make this very clear. This woman, my wife, walked in to purchase a watch. She did not raise her voice. She did not demand anything. She came in as any respectable customer would. Veronica's face turned pale. She tried to backpedal toward the rear counter, but Danielle's eyes caught hers, and held. Raymond continued, instead of being greeted with kindness or basic respect, she was met with judgment. With humiliation. And why? Because she doesn't wear labels on her sleeves? Or because you decided her skin color doesn't fit the brand image? A murmur spread through the boutique. Some looked down. A few walked quietly out. The reality of what they had just witnessed, what they had condoned, was too uncomfortable to confront. Raymond's voice lowered, cutting like glass. And now I ask, who among you will defend what just happened? Who among you believes she deserved it? Silence. Marcus finally spoke, his voice thin and cracking, Mr. Brooks. I truly apologize. We misunderstood. There was no ill intent. Raymond stepped closer, his eyes locked on Marcus like a hawk. You misunderstood nothing. You assumed. You judged. You humiliated her, in full view of your staff and clients. You stripped away her dignity not because she did anything wrong, but because of who you thought she was. Danielle stood quietly at Raymond's side, her chin lifted, her silence echoing louder than any outcry. She had been stripped bare in that boutique, and yet, she stood unbowed. Raymond turned to her now. Danielle, my love. You walked in here to give. To bring joy. To find a gift that meant something. She nodded once, eyes brimming but dry. And instead, he said, turning back to the crowd, you were given a lesson in how prejudice hides behind polished smiles and designer suits. Then came the blow no one expected. I am the majority shareholder of the prestige chain, Raymond announced, his voice steady. As of this moment, this location is under internal review, and its leadership under investigation. Gasps rippled through the boutique like a wave of electricity. Veronica stumbled backward. Marcus looked as though he might faint. Marcus Devlin, Raymond said, voice sharp as a verdict, you are suspended. Effective immediately. Every employee involved in my wife's mistreatment will attend mandatory anti-bias and diversity training. And Danielle. He turned to his wife. You will personally oversee that program. Danielle's lips parted slightly in shock. But what she saw in Raymond's eyes wasn't about vengeance. It was about power wielded responsibly. With precision. With purpose. With her. For a long moment, no one spoke. The glitter of the boutique's chandeliers seemed to dim beneath the weight of Raymond's words. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was charged, uncomfortable, and deeply sobering. Marcus Devlin stood frozen, the once confident overseer of Rodeo Drive's crown jewel now visibly shaken. Veronica Adams clutched the edge of the counter like it might save her from drowning in the judgment that now turned inward. She looked toward Danielle, hoping perhaps for a softened expression or a glimmer of mercy. But Danielle's eyes were clear and unreadable, far from cruel, yet deeply resolved. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. Raymond turned his attention back to the room. This isn't about just today. It's about a culture you've cultivated. A culture that treats certain people as invisible. Or worse, disposable. He stepped forward. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. Let me ask you something, what would have happened if Danielle weren't my wife? If she were just another black woman walking in here to buy something meaningful? Would you have let her walk out shamed, ignored, and unprotected? Veronica's mouth opened, but no sound came. Marcus looked at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. A few customers awkwardly glanced toward the exit, realizing the weight of the moment would follow them long after they left this boutique. Raymond spoke once more, softer this time. The true test of luxury isn't in the price tags. It's in how you treat the people who walk through your doors. Especially when you don't know who they are. With those final words, he turned to Danielle. My love, is there anything you want to say? Danielle stepped forward slowly, her heels clicking softly against the marble. She faced Marcus and Veronica, her tone composed, deliberate. You didn't just dismiss me. You erased me. You made me feel like I didn't exist, not because I couldn't afford something, but because I didn't match your narrow image of who belongs. I've experienced this before, too many times. But this time, I refuse to walk away quietly. She turned, addressing the room now, every staff member and customer watching. There are millions of women like me. Women who are told by looks, by tone, by silence that they aren't enough. That their money isn't welcome, their voice not valid, their presence inconvenient. We fight every day to rise. To belong in spaces that were never built for us. But make no mistake, we do belong. Danielle stepped back beside her husband, and the two of them stood tall together, equal pillars in the storm they had just weathered. Raymond gave one final look at Marcus and Veronica, then nodded toward the boutique's entrance. We're done here. As they turned to leave, Veronica's trembling voice finally found air. Mr. Brooks. Mrs. Brooks. I am sorry. Danielle paused. She didn't turn back. She simply said, show me you're sorry. To the next woman who walks through that door looking like I did. And the one after that. And with that, they stepped outside, the heavy doors of prestige closing behind them, not just on a moment of discrimination, but on an era of unchecked elitism. Outside, Rodeo Drive was buzzing. A crowd had formed, tourists, locals, even store owners from neighboring boutiques who had heard murmurs of what had unfolded. Whispers passed between them, that was Raymond Brooks. That was his wife they kicked out. Danielle didn't care about the stares anymore. What mattered was the shift she felt, subtle but certain. Something had changed. Not just for her. But for every person who had ever been told, without words, you don't belong here. Raymond's SUV waited at the curb, but neither of them got in yet. They stood there for a moment, breathing in the warm California air. Finally, Danielle spoke. I didn't cry, she said quietly. Raymond smiled. You didn't have to. You shook the whole damn room. They clasped hands, and with heads held high, they turned toward the quiet restaurant down the block, one they had always loved for its simplicity and warmth. A place that had never cared how they dressed. Just that they were kind. As they walked away, the crowd behind them began to stir. And somewhere, deep inside Prestige, the staff finally began to question what luxury was really supposed to mean. The soft clink of silverware and the low hum of conversation inside the quiet bistro offered a stark contrast to the storm Danielle and Raymond had just weathered. As they settled into a corner booth, Surrounded by exposed brick walls and tall plants that offered a layer of privacy, Danielle allowed herself a long exhale. Raymond studied her, his hand gently wrapped around hers. "You were incredible," he said. Danielle smiled faintly, the storm inside her beginning to calm. "I didn't feel incredible. I felt humiliated. Even when I stood my ground, all I could think was, what if I wasn't your wife? What if I didn't have that card to pull?" Raymond leaned closer. "You didn't need my name to prove your worth, Danielle. You did that the moment you walked out of that store with your head high." She looked down, her fingers brushing the rim of her water glass. "Do you ever get tired, Ray? Tired of proving you belong in rooms you've already paid your way into 10 times over?" He nodded slowly. "Every day. But I'm not tired of fighting. And I never will be. Not as long as they keep trying to pretend people like us are invisible." Their food arrived, grilled salmon for her, steak for him, but neither of them reached for their forks right away. Instead, Danielle looked out the window, watching the foot traffic move past the boutique they had just left. "Do you think the apology meant anything?" she asked. Raymond didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "No. Not yet. It's only words until something changes." Danielle nodded. "Then let's make sure something does." An hour passed, filled with conversation not about revenge but responsibility. Danielle spoke about her desire to ensure no other woman, no other human being, was treated the way she had been. Not just in prestige, but anywhere status and skin color still dictated value. Raymond listened, then made a call. By sunset, press releases were being drafted by his legal team. Statements were being issued to all prestige locations nationwide. Every employee would be required to undergo unconscious bias training and diversity education. And Danielle Brooks would serve as an executive advisor to the initiative, not because she was Raymond's wife, but because she had the vision and experience to rebuild what had been broken. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Danielle sat on the rooftop of their Beverly Hills home, a steaming cup of herbal tea in hand. She scrolled through her phone, finding her inbox flooded with messages. Some were from strangers, women of color, young professionals, everyday people, who had heard the story through the grapevine and sent notes of admiration, encouragement, and solidarity. But one message stood out. It was from a boutique employee, someone who had been behind the counter that day, silent during the confrontation. "Dear Mrs. Brooks," the message read. "I just wanted to say I saw what happened today. I didn't have the courage to speak then. But you changed something in me. I'll never stay silent again. I promise you that." Danielle read it twice, then set the phone down slowly. The damage done in that boutique hadn't just exposed prejudice, it had sparked a reckoning. She didn't smile, not exactly. But she felt something shift inside her. A beginning. A few floors below, Raymond entered the room and paused when he saw her expression. "Good message?" he asked. She nodded. "One that gives me hope." He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "What you did today, Danielle, it's bigger than us. You could have walked away. But you chose to stand." "I didn't do it to prove a point," she whispered. "I did it because I was tired of letting the world shrink me." Raymond reached for her hand and gave it a firm, quiet squeeze. "And now the world's going to have to expand," he said. "To fit women like you." By the following morning, Danielle's story had left the walls of prestige and burst into the wider world. Without fanfare or announcement, footage from inside the boutique had leaked online, captured by a customer who had thought they were filming an amusing moment of social awkwardness, but had instead exposed something far more insidious. The video showed Danielle standing calmly, being interrogated by Marcus and mocked by Veronica, her quiet dignity contrasting sharply with the boutique's icy condescension. The clip went viral within hours. Danielle woke up to hundreds of mentions on social media. Her inbox was overflowing. Her name trended on Twitter, alongside the hashtags #NotYourLuxury and #DignityIsNotDesigner. News anchors ran segments analyzing the confrontation. Commentators debated the broader issue of racism and elitism in high-end retail. Civil rights advocates, celebrities, and everyday users posted side-by-side images of Danielle in her white tee and joggers next to the ornate storefront of Prestige, challenging the very idea of who gets to be considered a real customer. But the most striking thing was not the outrage, it was the solidarity. Black women from all walks of life began sharing their own experiences under the same hashtags. Stories poured in about being followed in stores, ignored at makeup counters, or denied service unless accompanied by a visibly wealthy partner. For every story of Danielle's humiliation, there were thousands more. Danielle read each one with a growing sense of resolve. "This isn't just a story about me," she told Raymond that afternoon. "It's about all of us." Raymond, seated beside her on the sofa as she read, nodded. "And that's why it's time to do more than just react. It's time to act." Together, they called a meeting with the board of Prestige. Danielle would take the reins on building a nationwide equity and inclusion initiative. Not a press stunt. Not a PR patch. A full internal culture rebuild. Some executives resisted, quietly, behind closed doors. Others argued that this would disrupt the Prestige brand. But then Raymond spoke. "Your brand is broken," he said, his voice cutting clean through the boardroom. "Because it was never built to include people like Danielle. People who look like your customers but aren't treated as such." Danielle followed, standing with a calm authority that silenced even the most reluctant board member. "I'm not asking to be your image," she said. "I'm demanding that you reimagine what excellence and service really mean. Starting now." And starting now, it did. Within 72 hours, Danielle had established a task force dedicated to redesigning hiring practices, customer training, and leadership development programs focused on equity and representation. Boutique employees across the country were required to attend live, intensive workshops, including one session led personally by Danielle. There was pushback. One store manager in Chicago tried to boycott the training. He was fired the next day. Prestige wasn't merely being rebranded. It was being reborn, louder, sharper, fairer. And through it all, Danielle remained a reluctant face of the movement. She hadn't set out to become a symbol. But the world had chosen her moment as a mirror. She chose to make it a window. In one of the first training sessions, she stood before a room full of managers and staff, some defensive, others remorseful, and said, "I'm not here to shame you. I'm here because I believe people can change. But it starts with listening. It starts with unlearning what you've been taught about who matters." There was a long pause before a young associate raised their hand. "How do we begin?" they asked. Danielle smiled softly. "By understanding that dignity isn't earned by labels. It's a right. One you protect, not assign." And just like that, the work began. Weeks passed. And while the world's attention shifted, as it always does, Danielle's impact didn't fade. The transformation inside Prestige was slow, imperfect, but undeniable. Store layouts changed to feel more welcoming. Staff uniforms were simplified to remove barriers between client and associate. Sales goals were restructured to reward kindness and inclusive service rather than just profit. More importantly, Danielle insisted on something radical, that customer service be taught as human service. It wasn't about appeasing anger. It was about honoring people. Prestige's leadership soon realized that the changes weren't hurting business, they were driving it. Sales rose. New clientele emerged. Old customers returned with a newfound respect. Boutique employees, many of whom had never imagined they'd be a part of something socially impactful, began showing up differently. Danielle became a mentor to some, a mirror to others. She never used shame as a tool, she used truth. And yet, she didn't let the work define her entirely. At home, she was still just Danielle Brooks, mother of two, wife to Raymond, the woman who still liked her white teas and tea in the evening. But she had changed too. Her voice was firmer now, her smile more grounded. She knew what it felt like to be discarded. And now, she knew the power of not letting it break you. One rainy afternoon, Danielle received a handwritten letter. The envelope was expensive, the handwriting careful. It was from Veronica Adams. Dear Mrs. Brooks. I've taken the training you designed. I listened to your sessions. I've reflected on who I was that day and who I want to be moving forward. I'm not asking for forgiveness. But I am grateful for what you taught me. You turned a mirror toward all of us. And it changed me. Thank you. Veronica. Danielle sat in silence after reading it. Not because she didn't believe the words. But because they reminded her that impact wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it was a seed quietly taking root in the places where pride once stood. Later that week, Danielle walked past Prestigia's Rodeo Drive location. The same boutique that had once cast her out now bore a new display in its windows, black and white portraits of everyday women, diverse in style, color, age, and background, with a bold caption beneath them. You belong here. A woman at the door greeted Danielle warmly, not realizing who she was. Welcome to Prestige, she said. Let us know if there's anything we can help you find. Danielle smiled. Thank you, she replied gently. I'm just browsing today. And she stepped inside, not with fear or bitterness, but with quiet pride. Because this time, she didn't have to earn her place. She already owned it. Danielle's story reminds us that dignity isn't something you dress for, it's something you carry. It can be tested, denied, or even mocked, but never taken if you refuse to surrender it. As Raymond said, sometimes one right action is enough to change a whole generation of mistaken thinking. If you found power in this story, share it. Talk about it. Stand when others are silent. And never forget. Your voice matters, and so does how you use it. Subscribe to True Echo for more stories of courage, justice, and transformation. Leave a comment and tell us, when did you last stand up for yourself, or someone else? Let's keep the conversation going.